with a map of the world. And a bit of a plot spoiler. We'll be creating dashboards like this in Power BI using the COVID-19 data. So let me just go back one step before then and explain who I am. My name is Mark Wilcock. I'm a Power BI person based in London. And most interesting thing about me is that I run a group that's called the London Business Analytics Group. It's a community group, and we've been going for about 5 years, had lots of talks. And really now it's become the lockdown business analytics group because we can't meet in person. And so we're running a series of events called Solving Analytical Challenges in Power BI. And once a week, Mondays at 1 o'clock, Tuesdays at 7 o'clock London time. We're on to our 5th week, which is shape maps. So I hope you might join us at one of those. But today, let me start off. I've put a link in the meeting chat and just a few minutes ago, and that link is a bit.ly link. If you click on that link, you can come to these materials. This is all the kind of worked examples that I'll be building up during the hour. So we've got a Power BI file, we've got a couple of data sets there, we've got a README, and we've got what I'll call this a topo JSON file, which I will explain later on. If you were to click on the README file, what that has got is the links to the actual source data where I'm getting my data from, so you can go and get it. And those links I'm just going to show you in a minute. So what we are going to be doing is recreating to an extent public data about COVID-19. And the two main sources that people are using is this one. It's from the European Centre for Disease Controls. That is an EU body. And what we've got here, this is the dashboard. I'll show you the data in a minute. But basically, the dashboard is showing every country. And as we can see, the colour of the country represents the size represents the number of cases. So it's a kind of bubble map of the number of cases. We can see that the US has a very large number of cases, 671,000. What we've got here is we've got a table by country, the total cases and deaths, and the attack rate, which is the number of confirmed cases as a percentage of the population, I believe. And then some top level numbers, and then some numbers showing the number of cases over days, a bar charts for I think this one is for the EU, is it? Maybe it might be confirmed, maybe it's all of them. And then, yeah, by EU, and then it's broken down geographically in various ways. So that's the dashboard. It's, as I say, very good, reliable data. And if we want to click on, here are where the data sets are. I'm going to come back to those in a minute. Now, I slightly misled you when I talked about when I put my abstract together, because then I was going to use a different set of data, and that data is from the famous Johns Hopkins Institute. Here's their dashboard, and they've got a dashboard, very similar sort of dashboard. Cosmetically, it looks very different, but under the covers, it's just the same, and it's got the same data. We can see cases and deaths by country, and again, there's a data set for that. And if we click on this link into GitHub, we can go into it's within here, and then we've got some time series data, and then we've got, let me click on that. Well, when it comes up, didn't quite mean to go down there, COVID-19 data. Let's go back up. If we go into time series, and then we've got our time series, there's our confirmed cases. But very similar data sets. In fact, they come from a lot of the same sources, but I'm going to use this one, the European one, simply because it's a slightly tidier, cleaner data set. Right, good. Okay, so let's get started. I suppose a couple of things. First of all, to reiterate Jen's comments about this data, you need to, if you excuse the pun, it really needs to come with a health warning. Jen's alluded to the fact that different countries have all sorts of different ways of measuring data, whether they measure it just in hospitals, in care homes, in the community, whether it's a positive test or whether it's anybody with COVID-like symptoms. So different countries vary a lot. There's a lot of the data is out of date. and we know that a lot of cases, the amount of positive tests depends on the amount of tests. Some countries are testing more than others, so naturally they'll find more positive cases. With that aside, this is the data that we've got, and we'll look at it askance. But there we go. Why Amire, you're requesting control? Why is that? Is that just a mistake, or is that an issue? I'm going to deny unless you put something in the chat window. Great. Okay. Right. So somebody was just requesting control then. If there is a reason for that, just put it in the chat window. Is everybody okay? Any questions so far? Good. I can see nothing in the chat, so that's good. Just unmute yourself and give a chat if you need to do that. Right. Let's go back and have a look at this data. So I'm coming over here to COVID-19. This is the European data set, and it gives us the data in various formats: CSV, Excel, JSON. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come along to the CSV download, and I'm just going to say, I should be able to say, click on that and say right click, and I should be able to say copy link. And I'm going to copy that link and put that link in a new tab over here. Control V, that's the link I've got. And what that is if I pick it up, this is our data. Okay, let's have a look at it let's bring it into Power BI and have a look at it, and we'll clean it up and we'll create a few visualizations. So I'm going to put those down now. That's I'll come back to that's my worked example. What I've got here is I've just launched Power BI. There's no data brought in at the moment. The fields list is empty. Let's go and bring in that data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Get Data. And this is actually data from the web. And so when this comes up, I'm going to say that's that URL that I've just picked up for the EU data. I'll click on OK. And give it a second to go to it. And then, okay, it's taking a bit longer than it should, but never mind. Let's go. OK, here we've got our data. We've got a preview. I'm going to click on Transform Data to take it into Power BI's query editor, where we can shape up the data. Right. So let's have a quick look at this data. So what we've got is we've got a date, and that goes back all the way to the 31st of December last year. And then we've got 3 columns we really don't need. Because we've got the date, we don't need these 3 columns, day, month, and year. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to, I'll remove those columns in a minute. I'll just remove them. And then we've got the number of cases on that day, the number of deaths for that particular country. And then it gives us some other information about the country, the ISO 2-character code, the ISO 3-character code, and the population of that country. Let's just do a few things to clean it up. First of all, I'm going to call this my base data. And then I'm going to come in and I'm just going to rename some of these columns so that they're consistent. So I'm going to call that's my date. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to rename that. I'm going to call that I'll just make these capitals as well, and I'll do that there. And I'm going to make that simply country. Won't worry about the difference between a country and a territory. I'm going to Control C. I'm going to call this and we're going to need these later on. This is my country 2, and I'm going to call this my country 3. And I'm going to call that my population. So what I've got is I've changed those columns. Now let's do something here. We've got two data sets in here. First of all, what we've got is we've got data, kind of static data about the countries. And that data is not going to change from day to day. The population and the country codes haven't changed for many years. So we can take that and call that our country table. And then what we've got is we've got data which increases every day, which is about our cases. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come along and I'm going to say reference this table. I'm going to actually reference it twice. And one of these, this first reference, I'm going to creating a copy. I'll tell exactly why. I'm going to call this country, and I'm going to call this one fact. Lovely. Okay, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come along and say I don't want to enable load of this base. I'll explain why in a minute. Now, let's go to our country table. And actually, the columns that we want, what I'm going to come along is I'm going to come along and choose the columns. And the columns that we want on our country table are simply our country and its codes and the population. So I've got that data, that's what I want, but really it's repeated, the same thing is repeated for every day. So we really don't want that. So I'm going to come along and say, actually, I just want to remove duplicates. So now what I've got is I've got a country table, I've got 206 rows, one row for every country, and it's got the country name, its codes, and the population at the end of 2018. Now, actually, what I would have done if this was a real production is to kind of put that somewhere else so I can add extra columns to it, like the continent, whether it's in the EU, and that sort of thing. Lots of extra information about the country which might be useful. But that's good for now. Let's come to my fact table. And this time I'm going to do exactly the same. I'm going to say I'm going to choose my columns. And the columns that I'm going to choose, I'll just get on my date, my cases, my deaths, and my country name, because that's the way I'll link to the rest of the information about my country. So those are the 4 columns I want, and I've got that. So what I've done now is I brought in, I'll split those 2 data sets up. There's just one further data set that I want to bring in, and I want to bring in a calendar table. That's a table just with a row for every date in the period of interest. So I've got a row here for every date from the 31st of December when we got it. So let me just do that. So I'm going to go into new source. This is Excel. This is in the course materials. It's called calendar. I'm going to open it up. And I'm going to go to my calendar table. That's just Excel table. I'm just going to click on OK. I'm going to actually call this calendar. And what I'm going to say is we're only really in 2020, so I'm going to get rid of a few columns that I really don't need at the moment. I'm going to get rid of these 3 columns. I can always put them back. But what I've got is I've got a date every day from the 31st of December 2019, and it's got the month, the quarter, and the year. And it's also got the day of the week. Jen mentioned how there was lots of reporting going on, I think, on not so much at the weekend, but on maybe on Monday. So we see this kind of weekly cycle. So with the day of the week, we can do that sort of analysis. I don't really read the day of the month. I'll just remove that one as well. OK. Lovely. So I've got my data. Let's just do close and apply. This is bringing all the data into Power BI. It'll take a few seconds, and then we'll see all the data in the left here in the field list on the left. That's great. What I'm just going to do, just in case I get a crash, is I'm going to come along and I'll call it real. Just save the Power BI dashboard, so if I have to go back to it later on. Let's have a look at that data in the modeling pane. So what we've got our country, we've got our calendar, and what we've got a fact. Power BI has very helpfully created this relationship between the country and the fact table. And what it's joined it on the country column. It says the country column is the same in both. It knows that the relationship is like this because it looks at the country column in the country table and it sees that it's unique. It looks at the country column in the fact table, and it obviously for every date for every country we've got lots of dates. It looks it's not unique, and it can do this relationship. A relationship allows us to create a visual with columns from lots of different tables, and Power BI knows exactly what to do, how to join them up. Great. The next thing I'm going to do is just go to my date on my calendar, and I'm going to join my calendar date so that we've got that. What I'm going to do now is, well, now notice that we've got 2 dates, one on the calendar and one on the fact. And this is the same date. We don't really need them to see them both in our field list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the date field in the report view. We don't need to see both. And when we want to look at the date, we really want to look at it in the calendar table. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hide that country as well. I'm going to hide that in the report view because we've got the country over here. Great. So now we've got that, let's go and build our first visualization. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come along and I'm going to say, I want to have a look at my number of cases. I'm going to click on that. And what it's done is given me a bar chart. It's picked up, and we can change that visual later on. And with a single bar, and it says the cases is some large number. I can't quite read that number because I need some commas in it. So let's go and change that. I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to format it comma separated, and I'll do the defs at the same time. So now if I look at that in the tooltip, where I can see that there have been so far across all countries, across all dates, 2,100,000 and odd cases. Let's have a look at those cases by date. So what I can do is I can come along and I'm going to just take date and put it on the axis there. And what we get is this very familiar chart which shows a number of cases coming up. There obviously was some sort of correction there on February 13th, but basically coming up. And the good news, I suppose, is that the number of new cases across the world appears to be plateauing. We can come along and with this chart, and we can come along and we can put the number of deaths on as well. I just bring that and I put them in the value field. So we've got them there. We might want to say, actually, let's make it a bit more understandable by, well, cases can be in a blue, but maybe we want to put the deaths in the red so that it's easier to see them. So there we've got our first chart, cases and deaths across all countries. Now, what I'm going to do now is just to do something which is taking 2 minutes out to do something which you won't immediately see the benefit of, but we will later on. So what I'm going to do, when I look at cases here, and I put it on the value field, if I look at Power BI is summing the cases. It's summing the cases by date, and because we've got data in our axis and across all countries, because we haven't got country anywhere. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that an explicit calculation. And the reason for that is I'm going to reuse that calculation time after time, and it's simpler to write the new measure than to write sum of cases all the time. But just bear with me on this, and let's do that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on my fact table. I'm going to go into modeling, and I'm going to create a new measure. A measure is a calculation on the fly. And what happens is it brings up this little box here, which is a kind of like the Excel formula bar. It's where we can write our calculations. So I'm going to write one called the number of cases. I'm just going to use this hash meaning number of. If I was doing it properly, I would write out number of, but let's not. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to say it's the sum, and we've got some really lovely IntelliSense of the cases column in the fact table. Okay, and while I'm here, and what it's done is produced this little column here on the fact table called number of cases, and it's got this calculator icon to show it's a measure. I'm going to do exactly the same again. I'm going to do a new measure, and I'll drop this down so that we can all see it, and I'm going to do deaths equals sum of. Again, we can do the same. Okay, great. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come along to my chart, and I'll just take deaths off, and I'll put cases on there. And I'm going to make it, yeah. And what we can see, I hope, is that I've got the new and the old calculation here, and we can see every day has got the bar, and the bar is exactly the same length, which shows it's exactly the same calculation. So what I'm going to do is going to take my old calculation out. I'll put my deaths on there. I really have to go back and I'll just change it so it looks exactly as it was before. There we go. And what I'm going to do furthermore is I really want to use these in future, and I don't want to use these numeric fields. So I'm just going to come along and exactly as a bit before, I'm going to hide these so I don't inadvertently use them. Now, as I say, give me a few minutes grace and we're going to see why I've done that later on. Great. Okay. Right, so our next thing that we want to do is maybe we want to have a look at that data. I'll just put that up here. And maybe we want to have a look at that data by month. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a bar chart this time. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my month on the axis and my number of cases on the value. And we immediately look at this and this looks wrong. Let me just put it in here. And first of all, the first thing that we can see is any bar chart, Power BI puts a bar chart highest to lowest. So it's put April because it's got most cases highest. So let's just change that. And actually, I'm going to say I don't want to sort by the number of cases. I want to sort by month. But it still looks a bit odd. And let's just come along and say, actually, I want to sort ascending from lowest to highest. But even with that, what it's done is it's put the columns in alphabetical order, and that seems a bit strange. We really want them in chronological order. And the reason for that is we've just created this table. We haven't told Power BI it's any sort of special table. It just looks at month as a column, just like any other column, and typically sorts columns alphabetically. So let's go and change that. What I'm going to do is come over here to my data view, and I'm going to look at my calendar table. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come along to my month column, and it's got this sort by column. And I'm actually going to say I actually want to sort the column by the month key. There is this column over here, month key, 1 for January, 12 for December. So nothing seems to have happened here, but if I go back, you can see now I'm getting everything January, February, March. It's sorted properly. And I've changed the model. I've improved my model. It will work on any visual that I want. While I'm there, I also might want to think about looking at day of week and sorting that by the day of week key. This column here is 1 for Sunday, 7 for Saturday. So if we put it by day of week, that'll be in order. And also I can come along and actually hide these columns. These key columns, I need them to order my other columns, but I'm never going to use them in the on a visual. So if we have a look now at the calendar, those columns, those day of week are hidden, and we can see that that's fine. And if we were to come along and show by day of week, we can see there is some variation between the days of the week. Actually, that's more variation is more. Let's just come along and say, following what Jen said, I'm going to take country, drag it into the filter pane for fields on this visual. I'm going to choose the United Kingdom. And we can see that, maybe there are fewer cases reported on Monday, and Thursday seems to be when most cases are reported. That's that's obviously not what we'd expect is cases to be reported ideally roughly the same number of cases every day, but we can see that there are some kind of reporting backlogs there. Good. Right. Now it's time, I think, to produce some of those maps that you glimpsed at the beginning. And so let's come along, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to click on my map icon. And this is a Bing map. I'm going to bring it up here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take country and put it on location. And what happens here is that Power BI has gone out and it's geocoded those locations. It's gone out to Bing. Bing has said, I know where all these countries are. And it's given a kind of latitude and longitude point, which is the central point. Let me just check new messages to make sure that there's OK. Yes, you are free to join the London Analytics group while it's online. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's now called the Lockdown Analytics group. OK, let's get back to our map here. And what we might like to do is we might like to say, actually, what I want to do is to look at that by the number of cases. So I'm going to take my cases and put it on the size there. So what we've got is we've got a set of cases like that. We can see that North America has got a lot of cases. A couple of things there. First of all, that number of cases, again, I want to go do the same, and I want to come over here and format it nicely, and I'll do the same. So that basically I've put a comma in there so we can read it better. Of course, I can format percentages and things like that as well. I'm also going to do the same for my defs while I'm here. Right. What we might say is actually it is quite hard to the size of those bubbles doesn't change very much. I mean, we know that the United States has got the most, 671,000, and whereas let's have a look at down here, that's only got 11 cases, but yet it's not that is not much smaller. So maybe we want to change that. Let's do a couple of things before we do that. Let's compare that first of all. And what I'm going to do is compare it with a bar chart. So we're going to put a little bar chart there. And again, I'm going to put my number of cases, and I'm going to put it by my country. And what we can see is that let me just make this. I'll just make this a bit bigger. Come over here and make that a bit smaller. And so with that, we can read some very long country names there. The United States has the most by far, and then it's Spain, Italy, Germany, United Kingdom. We can click on this, it filters is there. And there is quite a skewed distribution. So and what happens is that Bing, when it comes and draws these circles, it's working out. The United States is the biggest, so a lot of them are these ones that it's not showing much differentiation. So let's try that. Let's try and fix that in a couple of ways. What we're going to do is we're going to come along here, and I'm going to create a new measure, and I'm going to go to again and click on a new measure. That's a calculation. And I'm going to say, I'm going to call it my log cases. And what I'm going to say, I'm going to take the log of the number of cases. I'll show you. So what I've done there is, if you remember back, your kind of log is 10 is the power of 10. Let me just show you what that does to this bar chart. So I'm going to come to this bar chart, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my log cases, and I'm going to replace it on cases. So I'm going to replace that. And if we have a look now up and down the bar chart, you see now that gives us a much more even distribution. And so what I'm going to do, I'll put cases back on here. If then I come back here and use my log cases to do my size, and oh, that should be, hold on, let's go back. That doesn't look quite right. Let me see, size log cases. Let me come along and change my bubbles a bit. I'm going to change my bubbles and take my bubbles down a bit. Let's have a look. That hasn't worked as well as I expected, but maybe what we can see is this should be, it doesn't look, something's gone slightly wrong there, but what I should have expected to get was different sizes of bubbles. But what that shows is doing calculation. Let's go a bit further and let's improve on this map that we've got. I'm going to take that, I'm going to bring that up there. And one thing that we could do is maybe we want to use a better color for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a custom color for my bubbles, and I've used a green, and I've used green for cases. I'll use a dark red for defs, and I think that's easier to see. I might want to come along to my map as well, and I might want to say, actually, I've got these map styles, and there's various map styles. It might be if we're using points and we're using different colors in a minute, then we want the map background to be a grayscale, so our colors and the difference between our colors, which we'll have in a minute, stand out. So I've changed the map. Let's compare this as well to a couple of other ways of looking at it. We've looked at the bar chart, but the bar chart has a few problems, as you can see, because a bar chart can only show maybe 10 or so bars. and we've got 200 countries here. One other way of looking at it would be to use a tree map. So if I bring a tree map up here and I put my number of cases and I'm going to show it against country, it gives me and what I'm going to do there as well is I'm going to come on to, gives me a very kind of deck chair like cases by country. Let me just come along to data colors and I'm going to go into advanced controls and I'm going to set it up. Oops, there we go. I'll just take the default because that gives me a kind of a set of blues. That's a bit nicer. But what that does, the cases by country, it shows we can get an idea of all of the different countries. What I can do as well is put the numbers on as well. So let me just come over here and I'm going to come along and where I'm going to put my data labels on. So we've got our numbers 671k and so on. So what we've got there is we've got our countries, and although it's quite hard to kind of compare is Italy better than Germany, what we do is we get a kind of big picture about it, and we can say, you know, there are 4 or 5, maybe 10 countries that correspond to about 50% of the cases in the world, and that gives us maybe a better idea of the relative sizes of cases in the countries than anything else. Okay, so let me just put that up on there. Another way to look at this would be to say and try and put our data into bands. So let me just bring up something here. That's not quite what I wanted. Let me see if that's there. Let me just bring up something. I'm just going to go to my useful DAX. Okay. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my cases here, and I'm going to write another calculation. This is for beginners, and it's not DAX. So DAX is a calculation language. I'm not going to go into too much of it. I'm going to intuitively explain the DAX. So what I've got here is I've got a calculation that tries to put things into different bands depending on the number of cases. I've just pasted it in, but I could have written it up. And if I had more time, I would do that. But basically, it says I'm going to look at the number of cases. It says this is kind of like an if statement. It says, first of all, find the first of these that is true. So if you come along and say, if the number of cases is less than 100, then I want you to return 1 or very low. If it's less than 1,000, then it's low, and so on, all the way. So I'm going to put that on there. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come along to this map. And what's happened here is now where we've got this new column called country case band. I'm going to come to my map here. I'm going to come to here, and I'm going to put my country case band on my legend. Actually, what I should have done, I'm going to come back to that one in a minute, but what I actually want to do, let me just do that. I'm going to come back to it when we get the shape map up. Let me just do that 1 second. Let me just go back. Right. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to come back to that in a minute when I come back to my shape map, but let me just do that differently. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to come along, I'm going to write a new measure, and let me come up, and what we're going to do is we're going to write a DAX calculation that is cases band number. It's going to be very similar, and what I'm going to say is that that's going to be named my calculation. I'm going to say switch, that's a kind of case statement, and I'm going to do exactly the same. So my expression is true. That says, and so what it's going to look at each, then we get a lot of value result pairs. So my first value is that I'm going to say cases is less than 100 for those countries or where they've got a very small number of cases. I'm just, instead of giving a text, I'm going to now give a number, because that's where I went wrong, where it needs says it. And then I can do, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this in just a few, so I don't spend too much time cases. And normally I would put less than 1,000. I'll put a 2 in there. And what have I done wrong? That grade tells me I've done something wrong. And I'll do cases. I'll say less than 100,000, free, and then I'll have a kind of else statement for. And that's my calculation. It's called cases band number. And I'm going to click on that. And we should see it here. It's gone into my calendar because I had my focus on my calendar when I was doing that. So what I can do is I can take that calculation and actually say I want it in my fact table. And now I've done that, I hope that I can come along to my cases band number and add it to my legend. Let's try that again. And for some reason I can't, but never mind about that. What I've got is, because I was once Boy Scout, is I've got an example here. And this is an example that you can download from Power BI, from that course materials. Exactly the same. It's what I expect to build. And this is a bubble map that I expect to build. And if I have a look, what I intended to do, you can see it's exactly the same map. But what I've got is I've got this country by case band. And what I've got in here is my country case band. If I have a look at that here, my mistake was that I should have created it as something called a calculated column. So what I'll do is I will cheat. I'll take that Control C and I'll go back because I know you want to see it done. I'll go back to my blank one, the one I've just there, and I'm going to come back to my country. I'm going to say actually I need a new column. I'm going to Control V if that goes in. I'll call it proper this time. And I'm going to say click on that. And now we've got that in our country column. Hopefully now, my apologies for this. Hopefully now what I can do is I can put that on the legend. And we've got, now we can put that we've got that legend with these different colors. Let me just do one thing here. What I'm going to do is create, Control Z is always gets you out of the fix. We need to click on an empty space, then create a new visualization. I'm going to take my country case band proper, put that on the axis. I'm going to take my number of cases. I'll put that on the value. And what we've got, again, what I might want to do, again, of course, is to go and sort that by country band proper, sort that by YAxis, and sort it ascending. And we can see, that looks a bit odd, but never mind. We can see if we have a look, we've got actually what I should have done, not number of cases. I really wanted to do it by the number of countries. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come along into my country. I'm going to create a new calculation, a new measure. And it's going to calculate, it's going to add up the number, going to calculate my number of countries. So I'm just going to say that's my number of countries. Oops. Drop that down a bit so we can all see it. And since each country is a separate row, I'm going to say count rows, that's a DAX function, of my country table. I'm going to click on that. That creates a column in here, a measure, a calculated measure called countries. Get rid of that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that on my on my values. Damn, I didn't get rid of cases. And what we can see, and now what we can do is we can click on here. And I think this is helpful because it kind of shows us the kind of geographical distribution. So I think these point maps and bubble maps are good, but they are even better when we combine them with other visualizations. Thanks, Rishi. Sorry, I only read your thing now, but there we go. So what I can do is, if we have a look at all the very low countries, they seem to be in kind of sub-Saharan Africa and Central America. If we have a look at the low ones, lots of them in Equatorial Africa and so on. Medium, we're getting more into Europe. High, we're seeing China, of course, and very high, the United States basically stands alone there as well, not this Spain, and unfortunately the United Kingdom now. So we've done that chart, and we put them there. But when we click on that tooltip, we have got a very awful tooltip. We've got this thing, it's showing us this country case band proper, which we don't really want to see, and it's giving us this log cases, which we use to try and kind of size the circles, not very successfully. So we could come along and we could say, actually, we can put more information on it. We can just come along to tooltips, and I can say, actually, let's do cases, let's do deaths. And we can do that, and that we've got our tooltip there. We've got more things on a tooltip, but maybe customizing and improving the standard tooltip is not the way to go. Maybe what we need is a proper custom tooltip. And I think that custom tooltips work really well with maps. So let's go ahead and build one and create a new page. I'm going to rename that page, and I'm going to call it my country tooltip. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say that I'm going to tell the page that it is a tooltip to behave like a tooltip, and I'm going to say that actually I want a tooltip size. It looks a bit odd, but if I come along to view it at the actual size, then I can see that we've got a kind of tooltip that's going to hover over. A tooltip is a page like any other page, so what I can do is that I can put any of my visualizations on it. I'm just going to do one at the moment, and I'm going to come along and I'm going to put a card on that tooltip. And what I'm going to do on that card, I'm going to put the country name. That's a bit big, so let's make that a bit smaller. I'll come along to my data label and make it 20. And I'll also put a bit of a background so it's a bit more obvious what's happening. Now that just shows me the first country, but when we actually use the tooltip, we'll use the tooltip so on the country map or bubble map, which is only showing one, as it hovers over a bubble, it will just be that filtered country. So let's make that a bit smaller. What we can do is let's have a look at, say, that the line chart for that country. So what I'm going to do here, actually I'll create a line chart, put that in there. And what I'm going to do with the line chart is I'm going to look at my cases over, I'll look at it by date. Okay. And let's just wire it up and then let's improve on it. So I'm going to come back to my map. And what I'm going to do is come back to that map and say, actually, what I'd like to do is to come to wire up this map to the tooltip. And normally, so far, it's been doing the standard tooltip, and we can format the standard tooltip. But what I want to do is actually want to say it's a custom tooltip report page. And it's only giving me one page because only one page in my report has got that tooltip behavior set. So that's tooltip. And once I've done that, what I've done is as I can look at my cases. Now we can improve on that a bit. Let's go back to our tooltip. And what we might want to do is a couple of things. First of all, space is at a premium. So what I'm going to do with this chart here is I'm going to take the title off. I'm also going to go into my YAxis. And I'm also going to take the titles off as well, because we don't really need to know it's the number of cases. And I'll take, it's actually not showing the title for the x-axis, so that's fine. So for the y-axis, I'll do the same. I'll take the title off. Where is it? There we go. That gives us a bit more space. The next thing that I'm going to do on this is I'm going to come to my date. I'm going to drag my date in there into fields on that visual, and I'm going to say, actually, I'm really only interested in looking at the last 2 months, basically, because what I'm interested in to see maybe if the peak is over. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to apply that filter, which I never do. I always forget to do. And now let's have a look at our visualization. If I come back to that and I hover, for example, I can zoom into these maps as well. If I hover over United Kingdom, we can see what the number of cases in the United Kingdom has been doing over the last couple of months. Let's hover and find the United Arab Emirates if I can. Here we go. And we can see Ooh, that's a very interesting chart. You seem to be collecting data on some days and not on others. So maybe we've gone to what we've done so far is we've shown daily cases. There's a couple of things that I want to do. What people often want to see is the cumulative cases. And so let's go ahead and do that. First of all, we have to do that calculation of calculating the cumulative or the rolling cases. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come and I'm going to create a new calculation. So I'm going to come to my fact, and what I can do is I'm going to go and create a measure. Now, what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to create something called quick measure. And this helps me even before I do that, there's one thing I want to do. I want to come along to Power BI and I want to tell Power BI, because it's important, that this calendar table is a date table. That means it's going to be used in calculations of time intelligence calculations. And for a date table, it's got to have a column that looks like a date, and that column's got to be contiguous. So it's got to have no gaps in it from the first date to the end date. It's validated successfully. My calendar table passes the test. So I'll click on OK. And what I'm going to do now, I'll go back to my fact table. I'm going to create a quick measure. And I'm going to say, actually, what I want, what I'd really like to do is have just a cumulative calculation, just a rolling calculation. Strangely enough, they haven't got that. So I'm going to do the next best thing. Since the data starts on the 31st of December last year, and there's only 23 cases for China, the cumulative is basically the year to date. And I've got a year to date there. So it's got running, actually has got a running total. So that's good. I didn't realize that. So, and before somebody tells me, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to say fact, my base value is my number of cases and my my field is my date and it is ascending. So let's have a look at that. We have got running total. You learn a new thing every day. So what I'm doing is it's created for me the DAX to do a running total. Let's have a look at that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come along and I'm going to say again, I'm going to create a line chart of my by date, and I'm going to take my cases as before. We can see all our cases. I'll make that bigger. And that's our daily cases. That's the cases on each day. So on the 11th of April, there were 89,000 cases on that day. What I'm going to do is they've got this thing called cases running total, which I'm going to call my cumulative cases. Just renaming it there. And I'm going to bring that on as well. And we've got our cumulative cases. Something a bit odd is happening here, isn't it? And what's happening is that we can see everything's working. We've got the cumulative cases, but at this stage, what happens is that it just stops at this bit, and then there's this flat line. And Power BI is doing the right thing. It's just saying that actually on the 20th of August in future, that is the year to date, because it doesn't know that we really want to finish here. What I'm just going to do for the moment is I'm going to come to my on this filter on this date, and I'm going to actually say here, I'm going to do it the cheating way. I'm just going to say, actually, I'm just filtering on relative dates in the last 4 months. And if I apply that filter, that's just taking us up to there. Now, what I actually do in the worked example that I show you is that I do a more complex thing. So if we have a look at the cases, the cumulative cases, I'm doing a calculation, which you can see I'm putting a kind of if statement in there to make sure that we get that. So if we have a look at that, if we have a look at my cases by that. Go on, show. So that's a better way of doing it, but I don't want to go into that amount of DAX at the moment, seeing I've only got a few minutes left. Okay. So I've got my cases, and I've got my cumulative cases, and what I might like to do is look at those by different countries. So what I'm going to do is I'll take my cases out of there. I'm going to take my country code and put it on the legend here. And so I might want to have a look at a few different countries. I'll look at the United Arab Emirates, and I'll look at the United Kingdom, and I'll look at France at the map, and those are the three that I'll look at. What I need to do as well is to bring country onto my legend. And what I'll do is I'll also just show Italy as well. So what we've got is we've got this chart that shows all the data. What I might actually come to my basic filtering on my dates and actually say, let's do it in the last couple of months because nothing happens before February. So we can see it a bit better there, and we can see how each country is doing. Now, the final thing I want to do is this. A lot of the newspapers have this chart, but on the chart, they have this thing, the log axis there. And because the log axis is important, because if we see something going straight line in the log axis, in fact, then we know that it's doubling in a certain period, and the steepness of the line shows as if it's doubling once a week or once every 3 days. So what I can do, I remember that I can come along to my Power BI and I can come along to my Y-axis and I can change this to log. But I've got a problem here. And my problem is that Power BI is only giving me a linear scale. It's not giving me a log scale. And Power BI, what it's doing, it's not being very helpful, but what it's done is it's come back to this data and it's seeing, well, you've got some zeros in those numbers. And the log, if you remember from your school maths, that the log of 0 is not a number. So it's saying, I'm not allowing you to do that. So what we're going to do, we don't really need those zeros. So what we can do is we can improve our calculation, the one that we've just done. Let's do that and improve our calculation. And to remove those zeros, then we'll be able to do our log axis. So let's go ahead and do that. So we've got our cumulative cases here. That's our calculation. What I'm going to do is improve on that. First of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say var and so what we've got is we've got this var, and I'll make that capital as well, return syntax. This temp doesn't matter, so I'm putting in this syntax. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create several variables and then we're going to calculate that. So what I'm going to do is this. I've got this variable temp. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say variable, I'm going to call that rolling, and a double underscore is my convention, and I'm going to say that it is equal to that calculation, and then I'm going to do return rolling. Okay, let me just. Okay, and if I click on that, nothing's changed there because I just put it in a variable. But what I can do now is I can say return, and I'm going to do a shift return here. I'm going to say if I'm going to say rolling is greater or equal to 1, then I can return my number. Otherwise, I'm going to return a blank. Return, and I'm going to click on that. And the chart hasn't really changed, except now we don't have any zeros in there. And what I hopefully can do now is I can come to my Y-axis, maybe I have to refresh, and now it gives me my log axis. So now I'm seeing the kind of standard chart that you see in lots of the newspapers at these news briefings, which has basically got the date and various countries, and the log axis we can see goes 1, 10, 100. And what we can see, for example, that's France. Over here, if we have a look at the United Kingdom, it might suggest that the United Kingdom is not doing so well. We kind of started later, maybe our initial pace was good, but where we are not slowing down the curve as fast as maybe France has done, maybe because our lockdown is not quite as severe. Good. So that's what I wanted to show you. Just to remind you that the link, and I will put the link the link back later on, has to the course materials, and that takes us to the worked example, which is this, which goes slightly further than what I've shown you. So you can take that if you want and analyze it. We've got our bubble map, but I've also created a shape map. On the shape map as well, I've made a slightly better tooltip than the one I just did in the hour, adding the cases and the depths in each of those. Again, I've got the banding so we can have a look at the different countries, and the shape map works very well with that. We've done our log axis there, but also another thing that I've done is that I've done a just, you know, first of all, I chose countries, but here what I've done is I've just said, actually, just give me the top 5 countries by the number of cases. So let's make that 10 just to prove the point. Rather than choosing countries, it's giving me the kind of 10 most countries by the total number of cases. And the last thing I was doing, I was playing around, and I hope it works. Let's have a look. Is it tested? It's this one. Is what I want to do, and let's see if this works. If I play it, is I've created a bar chart here, and what I've done, yep, let's start it off. It's going, yeah, it's going. And with that bar chart, it's just got certain countries in that. And then I've added this custom control that filters on the date. So what we're seeing in that bar chart is we're seeing the cumulative number of cases up to the date that's showing the 15th. I really should have put that date in big somewhere else. But we see we're now up to March the 19th, and China has stopped growing the number of cases, but France, Italy, and the United States are growing, and the United Kingdom. We're now at the beginning of April, and we can see that really what it's showing here is over the last few days, the significant growth in the United States. So that kind of really brought it home to me. We look at the numbers every day, but that really brought it home to me just how fast things had been moving in the last few days. So thank you for listening to me the last hour. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've got any questions, just give me a shout. Just a reminder that in my meetup group, we're doing these weekly series. The next one is all about the shape maps, which I didn't show. We meet on Mondays and Tuesdays. It's been very popular. Mondays at 1 o'clock London time, Tuesdays at 7 o'clock London time. You can join for that. That's a Teams meeting. And if you want to see what we've done so far, there's a YouTube playlist which has got very short summary videos of all the week's sessions that we've been in before. And to get that playlist, you go to meetup.com, you go to London Business Analytics Group, and if you click on what we're about, you can see that. Let me just click on read more. If I do that, it will, yeah, it's got the playlist there. Great. Hopefully you've enjoyed that. Please drop me an email or LinkedIn. I'll put the details there. Again, Raz has already done that. Thank you, Raz. But then I'll give you 2 minutes to get a coffee before the next person. Thanks again.